In this video, we are going to discuss about the decision-making statements in Python. But before starting decision-making, we must know about indentation in Python. That what do we mean by indentation? So indentation is nothing but a very important practice to do while we are writing the decision-making code in Python. And if you want to run your program without any error, then you must do the indentation. Otherwise, you will get indentation error when you run the program. The best way to give the indentation after any colon, you can press the enter key, or either you can give some space by pressing the space key, or you can give the separate space for after pressing the tab key. In some platforms of Python like Jupyter, Google Colab, etc., it gives indentation on its own only. Indentation, for more clarification, you can see that what I am trying to say is that, for example, if you are given a particular statement which you have executed here, now here you are giving the if condition. Next, after pressing the colon, you must press enter, then it should start from here, not from here. Otherwise, you will get the indentation error of Python. Then you can give after the if condition if there is any other if condition also, like this. And then here you can give the statement which if true has to be executed. Similarly, the else will be here and the statement will be here if the else condition is true, and then the final statement will be here. If you write the code in this particular format, then you will get no error of indentation, your program will run. So indentation is must while we are discussing or while we are implementing any decision making statement. Now in Python, decision making statements are usually when it supports condition from mathematics, that is simple mathematics condition, decision making statements in Python. That is if a equals to b. This condition means that the a and b, if any value is stored, then both the values are equal. So this is the particular condition. A not equals to b, that if a is not equal to b. Now these all conditions we all know that if a is greater than b, a is smaller than b, a is greater than equals to b, a is less than equals to b. These are the conditions and their respective descriptions which I have just now said. Now in Python, we have decision making statements, and those following statements are if else, elif statement, and lastly nested if. These are the three decision making statements which are there in Python, and now we are going to discuss about one by one and execute a program of each. So the very first decision making statement which we have in Python is if else, and we have discussed about if else in other programming languages also. It is quite similar here too, that if conditions passed in the if statement are true, that is if statement conditions are set to be true, then those set of statements which are under if will be executed, or the else statements will get executed. If the statement turns to be false, then the false or else part of the particular decision making statement will execute. So simply it will start, it will check for the if condition. If that condition turns out to be true, it will execute the body which is there in the if, and then it will execute the statement which is just under if, and simply it will end. And if the statement after checking it turns out to be false instead of true, then it will execute whatever there is in the else block. Those statements will be executed and then it will end. Simply it will be done. Now how can we write that particular if else program in Python? How can we do that? For example, we are writing if, the expression which we want to write, then the statement which we want to execute, and if there is else, lastly the statement which is going to be executed in the else. Now next which we have in the decision making is the second statement which we have is elif. Now what is this elif? Now the syntax basically for elif is, firstly it is going to check for the if, that if expression it is going to check. If that expression is true, it will execute a set of statement. Else we are going to write, it doesn't have else if statement, that's why in Python we use elif. Elif, again you can give any particular expression and check for that statement. You can give multiple elif expressions too for checking according to your programming conception, according to your program concept. And lastly, you can execute the else statement. Similarly, next we have nested if. And in nested if, you can execute multiple if statement but in separate blocks. Along with the elif and else you can also include. For example, if you have executed this particular if statement and have executed an expression, and here you've been given the statement which needs to be executed if this particular expression is true, if it turns out to be true. Or else you can check for inside that particular if, you can mention another expression for checking off that particular value which turns out to be true and execute that particular statement. So this is actually known as nesting and also known as nested if. Similarly, you can execute the elif statement and lastly the else statement of both the if to close the particular decision making statement. Now we will execute an example of each. Now here you can see that I have written a program for comparison between two numbers, that which one is greater, and I have used the input which we have discussed to take input from the user. I am entering firstly the first number from user and similarly the second number. Then I am checking with the help of if else. If A is greater than B, then print that particular number A is greater, or else print that B is greater. This is it going to print, and this is actually the indentation which we talk about, that indentation is must, otherwise we will get an indentation error. As I execute this particular cell, it is going to ask me firstly to enter the first number. So let me enter the first number as 12. Next it is asking me to enter the second number, that I am entering as 22. So it is after execution it prints that 22 is greater. This is how it gets print. Now if I write this particular statements like this in if and else and execute this particular cell, then you can see here indentation error occurs. So indentation is must in Python. So what we have to do is we have to just give a space, and in this line also. And now you execute this particular code, it won't give you any error. So that's why I said that indentation is must while you are executing a Python program. Next, this is a particular which we have executed for if-else decision making. Now if I want to use for elif. So let us do and just give a condition here only, that after this, here only if I want to give elif A is equals to B. If such a condition arises that both the numbers turns out to be same, then what will be done? So then in the print statement you can give that A and B are same numbers. If such a condition occurs, then it is going to display that A and B are same numbers. This is the condition which we have given. Now I will execute this particular cell again. So it is asking me for the first number, I am entering as 15, and the second number, let us enter 15, so that let's see elif block executes or not. So here you can see it prints that A and B are same numbers. Next, if you want to do the nesting, then for nesting condition we will execute a separate program. Let's see how can we do that. Firstly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the input from the user and store that particular in X variable. So here you can see that I've taken the input from the user in integer type value and input, and what it is going to print in the console, that value of X is this, it is going to print. Next, I'm executing a if statement, and the condition which I'm giving is that if X is greater than 50, then it is going to print that the value is greater than 50, whatever the value you have entered. So it is going to print that the value is, this is it going to print. Next, if I want to do the nested if, then I have to execute a if statement within this particular block only. So we give the condition that if X is greater than, the value which is entered is greater than 100 also, then it is going to print that the value is greater than 100. So this is how nesting I have done of both the if statement. Lastly, I'm going to print the else statement to close this particular blocks of each. So let us print the else statement. Else, if this particular is not greater than 100, then it is obviously less than 100. So let us do that and print that the value is less than 100. This particular first if block in nesting, this is completed, that it is having an if and else for execution too. Next, I am going to close the first if block which we included with the help of else. And how can we do that? Like here, else it is going to print that the value is less than 50. So this is a set of code for nested if. Now let us execute this particular block, and as I execute this particular block, it's asked me for the value of x. So I am giving the value of x as, let's give the value of x as 23. So it is going to print that the value is less than 50. Why? Because it had checked here only. It doesn't go inside that loop because the value is already less than 50. So it executes the else statement. If I execute this cell again and give the particular value as 65, then the value is greater than 50 and the value is less than 100 it prints. How? Firstly, it enters this if block and checks, yes, 65 is greater than 50. So it is going to print that the value is greater than 50. Next, it goes inside this particular if block and checks that x, that means 65, is it greater than 100? No, it automatically executes the else block and exits from the loop. So this is how decision making is done in Python with the help of if else, elif and nested if statement.